Okay, well, welcome everybody, and let's jump right in here. So as Dr. Hogue begins his talk in just a second, you'll encounter a framework that connects theology, spirituality, and public life in a way that may feel new to some of you. So Dr. Hogue invites us to consider that every community, whether religious or secular, carries an underlying picture of what is most real and most valuable. So a symbolic center that shapes how people interpret power, justice, and their responsibilities to one another. He argues that our ideas about the sacred, even when we don't name them as such, influence how we build societies, how we justify or challenge authority, and how we understand our place in the wider web of life. So the sections ahead lay out this basic insight. And here it is. So our political world is never spiritually neutral, and our spiritual imagination always has political consequences. Our political world is never spiritually neutral, and our spiritual imagination always has political consequences. Now from there, Dr. Hogue introduces two contrasting models of the sacred that continue to influence Western culture, meaning they influence us as well. One model imagines ultimate reality as distant, supreme, and separate. And this is a picture that tends to legitimize hierarchy, domination, and the concentration of power. The other model sees the sacred as relational, creative, and woven into the world itself. An image that encourages cooperation, mutuality, and shared flourishing. Now, both these models serve as a lens for understanding American political culture, meaning how certain theological assumptions that we have shaped national myths, justified systems of harm, and distorted democratic ideals. The remainder of the talk uses this analysis that I've been talking about to move toward a more life-giving public vision rooted in empathy, liberation, equality, and the spiritual recognition of our deep interdependence. So, this is the terrain you're about to explore. How different visions of the sacred make possible very different forms of political life, and how reimagining the divine or the sacred might help us reimagine democracy itself. And I know we're Unitarian Universalists. Some of these terms and phrases might make us uncomfortable, but that's okay. We're here to learn and think about new ways of thinking about politics, democracy, theology, spirituality, etc. So, if you listen really deeply, what you'll notice as you listen is how Dr. Hogue's analysis resonates with the spiritual and political story we explored last week through Ralph Waldo Emerson, Hinduism, and the Transcendentalist movement. Emerson taught, as we talked about, that the sacred is not a distant ruler, but a presence woven through nature and the human soul. Remember this? A vision he learned in part from the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, which are both sacred Hindu texts. That insight, like I said last week, shattered the old hierarchies of Emerson's inherited Christianity and opened a path toward a democracy grounded in the divine dignity of every person. Dr. Hogue takes this same insight, the shift from a transcendent, dominating God to an immanent, relational sacred, and shows how it still shapes our politics today, which is really exciting because we just talked a lot about this. So where Emerson spoke of the oversoul, again a term I'd never like, and the unity of all life, Dr. Hogue speaks of relationality, interdependence, and God as verb. Where Emerson argued that democracy is a spiritual revelation rooted in conscience, Dr. Hogue describes resilient democracy as a political form grounded in empathy, liberation, and shared becoming. In other words, the very Hindu transcendentalist worldview that helped spark America's great democratic reforms in the 19th century is the same spiritual imagination that Dr. Hogue is recovering and applying to our moment now. And I think that's super interesting and some stuff we can learn from. So I'm really excited to dive into Dr. Hogue's talk for the next 20 minutes, and then we'll chat about it after. See you soon.
I'd like to begin to talk about American immanence. So like I said, there will be an alliterative digest form that I will go over in a few minutes, but essentially that digest form is a way of thinking about the bad or the problem that the book is dealing with around 3 E words, the good or the solution that the book is dealing with around 3 other E words, and then how to realize the good by way of 4 A words. I'll come back to that though. So the book is organized around, as I said, critical, conceptual, and constructive theses. The critical, the first 2 chapters of the book are where the critical theses are developed, and and that's in the first 2 chapters. And they present a genealogical critique of American exceptionalism. I argue that the theopolitical core of American exceptionalism is what I call the Redeemer symbolic. The Redeemer symbolic is a mythic configuration of transcendence, sovereignty, and salvation that has structured the American imagination since the colonial period. This symbol fuses Protestant theological motifs, divine chosenness, moral purity, providential destiny, with Enlightenment liberalism's faith in progress and autonomy. Now, I argue that this symbol, the Redeemer symbolic, sustains and sanctifies structural crises. Politically, it sustains and sanctifies imperialism and white nationalism. Ecologically, it sustains and sanctifies extractive capitalism. It sustains and sanctifies a certain, kind of a morality of denial and disavowal and moral paralysis. These crises reveal the exhaustion of transcendental frameworks that separate the divine from the world, the human from nature, and moral innocence from historical entanglement. So the critical thesis of the book is therefore is that American exceptionalism is a theological pathology, and it is a failure to acknowledge finitude, relationality, mutuality, and vulnerability. The conceptual theses are in the middle of the book. They're the middle chapters, and they're where I develop basically the philosophical infrastructure, philosophical and theological infrastructure for a particular approach to democracy that I articulate in the constructive theses. So these middle chapters are a lot of philosophy, and I engage especially William James, John Dewey, Alfred North Whitehead, but I also engage theologians and other philosophers influenced by those major figures. And in this conceptual work, I construct the groundwork for an alternative theopolitical orientation, immanence. And I develop this in its metaphysical, its epistemological, and its moral vision. So according to this conceptual system rooted in process relational philosophy, pragmatism, naturalism, radical empiricism, reality is constituted by relational processes of becoming rather than by static substances or transcendent causes. There is no outside or beyond this. Divine creativity unfolds within the world's entanglements. Value, agency, and meaning are emergent features of relational life. They are not pre-existing absolutes. So according to this tradition, human experience is continuous with nature. Experience is not reducible to conscious experience, the way humans experience. It's not reducible to representational experience that can be put into language. Experience is deeper than that. It's even deeper than sensory experience. Experience in this tradition is, at its deepest roots, it's aesthetic. It's a combination of aesthetics and affect, feeling. So experience at its deepest level is a kind of feeling of the world. So, and this is continuous throughout nature. So sometimes this tradition is described as panpsychism, meaning that the psyche or mind is present throughout the whole of things. And that doesn't mean like the human mind, but it means there throughout the world, throughout the universe, there's a kind of mental aspect to things, but not like the way we think about it. It means that everything that is in the universe is a subject of experience. Okay, and so to know the world truly, we need to attend to the more of experience, its felt intensities and dependencies and mutual affections. So this is a spiritual empiricism that grounds ethics in attentiveness to the plural and the particular. Politically, working with this tradition, we could say that democracy is not merely a political form, but a metaphysical and an ethical disposition. It's a practice of cultivating openness, vulnerability, and responsiveness to difference. The democratic imagination emerges through immanent life. It is how we live in relation to an unfinished and uncertain world. So my conceptual thesis in sum is that immanence offers the ontological and epistemic conditions for reimagining democracy as a spiritual practice of relatedness, creativity, and humility. Now, the constructive theses. So my final chapter turns from metaphysical reorientation to ethical and political reconstruction. I propose fusing a theology of and for the planet with a politics of and for the people. Against the redemptive imaginary of control and purity in American exceptionalism, I advocate for resilience as a practice of living with ambiguity, fragility, vulnerability, and interdependence. Resilience is a revolutionary spiritual discipline. That is, it's a discipline that changes things over the long haul. Revolution in the sense of turning things around. And it's rooted in ecological and democratic solidarity. So that's my constructive thesis. Resilient democracy is the theopolitical form that I build out of the conceptual theses and present as an alternative to American exceptionalism and the Redeemer symbolic. So resilient democracy is really about a reculturing of what we mean by democracy and how we practice democracy. And we'll see in a minute in the digest form what some of its characteristics are. So let's go back to these. Let's go back to the letters, the E letters. We'll start with the E letters. So the 3 E's of the Redeemer symbolic. Remember, this is the bad. This is the thing that I'm critiquing. The 3 E's of the Redeemer symbolic are exception, extraction, and externalization. So this is these E's come out of a Christian, the Christian symbol of redemption in Christ. Christ is an exception in the sense that Christ is both, God and human, and so isn't like other things that exist. In the story about redemption, human sin is externalized onto the Christ figure. Christ figure becomes that which absorbs the human sin, and so salvation is extracted from the Christ figure. So we see this pattern. What I'm saying in the critical chapters is that we see this pattern that I call the Redeemer symbolic, moving and migrating across ecclesial, nationalist, and capitalist forms. There's an exceptional figure of some kind. In the ecclesial phase of the Redeemer symbolic, it's the city on the hill. It's the idea that that this group of Puritans is an exceptional representation of what it means to be Christian. They extract land, right? They extract land from the indigenous peoples who were there to begin with, and they externalize in various ways, right? They would exile certain people out of their group who didn't live up to expectations. So exception is the theology of sovereignty. It's the power to stand. These are characteristics of the Redeemer symbolic. It's the power to stand above or apart from the law. The theological root here is monotheistic transcendence, the sovereign God who rules from outside creation. This is manifest in American exceptionalism, the belief that the U.S. is exempt from limits and uniquely chosen to redeem the world. And this results in authoritarianism disguised as divine mission, democracy's slow death by sacred exemption. In sum, we could say that exception sacralizes exemption. Exception sacralizes exemption, claiming the divine right to decide for others. I think there's some clear examples of this in our present moment. I mean, almost cartoonishly vivid examples of this idea, exception. Exception sacralizes exemption, the power to decide on the just and the good. But the other E that's relevant here in the critique of American exceptionalism and the Redeemer symbolic is extraction. This is the economy of transcendence. This is about the conversion of life and relation into resource and profit. The theological root here is that separatism that I talked about earlier, the separation of spirit from matter, God from creation, the world from the world as raw material for divine or human use. And the political and economic form of extraction is capitalism as sacramental extraction, turning vitality into value, the earth into capital. The spiritual cost of this extraction is alienation from the interdependent web. It's the disenchantment of the world. In sum, if exception sacralizes exemption, I would say that extraction is transcendence in economic drag. It's the divine removed from the living fabric of the world. Externalization, the third E in American exceptionalism and the Redeemer symbolic. This is about the morality of disavowal, again, which we see so much of these days. It's about offloading harm and guilt or grief onto others, racialized, gendered, or ecological others. And the theological root here is this scapegoating logic of purity and sacrifice. Remember that particular way of thinking about Christ as Redeemer. This leads to cultural practices around waste, disposability, incarceration, militarization, and the planetary dumping, essentially, of costs. So I have in mind here, like, in economics and finance, in externalities, a cost that's not accounted for. That's the basic logic here. So the outcome of this is that innocence is maintained through denial, and empathy is stunted. So, in summary, for this E, externalization is how the exceptional stay pure. It's the moral alchemy of disowned consequence. All right, now let me go to the three E's of resilient democracy. Empathy, emancipation, and equality. Empathy is the spiritual ground of resilient democracy. It is attunement to shared vulnerability. It's the capacity to suffer with rather than dominate over. It's rooted in an immanential theology. If the divine is relational, then feeling with others is, the pulse of the sacred. And its political function, functioning politically, empathy counters exception by dissolving the illusion of separation. Now, what does it mean to put empathy into practice? What does that look like? It's about cultivating attentiveness, attention, care, curiosity, lament, and compassion. In sum, I would say that empathy is the feeling of internal relatedness, of being at stake in other life. The second E of resilient democracy is emancipation, the ethical work of liberation. This is about release from domination at personal, structural, and spiritual levels. Again, within an immanential theology, it is a salvation without transcendence, freedom as participating in the living whole. Emancipation functions politically to transform empathy into organized struggle for liberation, justice, and planetary repair. What's this look like in practice? I think abolitionist politics of various kinds are expressions of this. Reparations is an expression of this. Ecological restoration, mutual aid, cooperative economies, and in sum, final sentence to kind of summarize this, emancipation is empathy in motion. It is the collective labor of freeing the world from its idols and liberating us from one another. Equality, the third E. This is the political form of the sacred in an immanential theology. This is about dignity and participation for all in the creative unfolding of the world. The theological basis here is that no being stands outside the process of becoming, and so all partake in divinity. Politically, this is democracy as co-creation rather than competition. What's it look like in practice? It looks like participatory governance, inclusive institutions, pluralist spirituality. In sum, equality is not sameness, but the dignity of shared becoming. All right, so I described the three baddies, the three goodies. Now, how do we bring this about? We bring this about by the 4 A's: agitate, activate, associate, and amplify. So these are the 4 A's of revolutionary change. By agitate, what do I mean? Disturb the idols. Here, this is about prophetic disruption. It's about the waking of denial. It's shaking up of exception and apathy. In practice, it's public lament, it's protest, it's creative dissent, it's truth telling, it's artful interruption, it's the no kings gatherings. Spiritually, agitation is about the apophatic, about negation. It's the holy no to the world as it is. And this saying no to the world as it is makes space for a more just yes. In sum, to agitate is to love the possible world. But agitation isn't enough. Most folks think of activism in a pretty limited way, I think, strictly around agitation, about disruption. But we need something new brought to life to replace the thing that's being denounced. And that's where activation comes in. This is about embodying the alternative. This is about turning lament and grief and awareness into concrete action. This is about practicing mutual aid networks. It's about building local cooperatives. It's about climate assemblies and neighborhood resilience. Spiritually, it's it's the incarnating of the possible. It's the word, the idea, the ideal becoming flesh. It's about vision in motion, ideas becoming real. In sum, activation is animating the possible. But agitation and activation aren't enough either. We need to build the commons, and this is what associating is about. This is about weaving the spiritual and political tissues of democracy. This is about alliances. It's about congregations and coalitions and cooperation. It's about building spaces of belonging and becoming. And philosophically, we can say it's rooted in Dewey's social democracy, Whitehead's organismic cosmos, and William James's more, where relatedness is a fundamental object of experience or subject of experience. Spiritually, we can think about association as communion. This is the sacred sharing of mutual dependence. In sum, in a crystallized sentence, association is how we structure the possible. But just, association, agitation, and activation aren't enough either. There needs to be a fourth A, amplification. This is about animating the counter world. The purpose here is to magnify life-giving practices and narratives through art, through storytelling, through ritual, through digital media, public theology. Spiritually, we can say this is about resurrection. These are silenced truths, repressed. This is about dissenters rising collectively to give testimony to the alternative, to the counter world. In sum, amplification is how we scale the possible. All right, well, that's it. Thank you for your attention and interest, attention to my work, your interest in it, and I hope to meet you in person sometime.